So in this video, I'm going to cover how to create a wealth allocation plan, which is part of our 6 pillars of impact. And the questions that will answer are, number 1, how should you position your investments as you move into this next phase of your life? Number 2, how do you balance the need for growth and the need to preserve your investments? And then number 3, how do we avoid buying high and selling low? So in this video, I'm going to cover the framework that we use to build out a wealth allocation plan, which really just helps to say, can I have confidence that my money lasts as long as I will? And so we're going to go through that framework today. Now, I'm also going to be using the whiteboard along the way. And I think the first thing that we need to understand is that it's been our experience that people will come in for the first time meeting us and we'll have a discussion with them. And their experience with investing has been this. They get introduced to what's called a risk tolerance questionnaire, which is just a form that asks a handful of questions. You know, what's been your experience investing? What are you most apt to do? You know, sell when things are bad, buy more, maybe just hang tight. So you answer these questions, and then through that process, it tells you whether you're conservative or moderate or aggressive. And then ultimately, it's been our experience that these people, they get put into a portfolio that's pretty much the same portfolio that every other person has answered those exact questions like that. And so in this video, I want to talk about why I think that's flawed and how to rethink about the whole idea of how to position our money. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is I want you to think about your money in terms of a home, okay? Now, there's something we call a fiscal house, which we have adopted from others, and it's something that a lot of universities use for their endowments. And it looks something like this, where, you know, we have this house, and really you have 3 main components. You have the roof, you have the walls, and you have the foundation. And so each component of this house has a very different intent or need. And so I want you to think of this in terms of your money. Now, the first thing that we like to look at is we like to say, okay, so if you watch some of our other videos, you have found how to create an income plan. Well, once you've kind of done that, here's kind of what you've come to the conclusion of. You've said, okay, I have this much income coming in up here, and then I have this much in expense that goes out here. Now, for those of you that have less income than expense, this ends up being a negative number. And so when that's a negative number, that just means we have a gap that we have to fill. And so what we end up doing is we say, okay, if we need, for example, let's say we need an extra $2,500 per month. Well, if we need that $2,500 a month more, we would then go into our investments, and let's just assume we have this bucket over here where we have all of our investments over here, and we say, okay, we have to supplement our income with $2,500 a month. Well, that right there was the first process in building out our fiscal house. Because the first thing we need to identify is, do you have enough money to live the lifestyle you want to live? Well, if you don't, we've got to go grab some money and we have to reposition it to generate more income for you. And so the first section here, these walls, they represent our income, okay? Now, the second step of creating this wealth allocation plan is going to be I want you to think about this. So let's assume we have $1 million and we say to ourselves, okay, we have $1 million that we've saved between IRAs and after-tax investments. Now, with that $1 million, let's make the assumption that we found out that we needed to dedicate $300,000 to providing additional income for our monthly support to live our life, right? So we took 300 of our million and we dedicated it to income type investments, taking care of the walls. Well, that still leaves, right? That still leaves $700,000. So here's the next question that I would pose. Now, if you had $700,000 and you're transitioning into retirement, you are no longer working, you are not accumulating more money, you're not buying more shares, you're not putting money into your 401k, right? All that is coming to an end. Now, one of the common themes is people say, I really don't want to have to go back to work, right? So you look at this 700 and you say, how much of that $700,000 do you want to make sure you cannot lose? Now, every person is going to answer that question very differently. But I think it's reasonable that a lot of people in that phase of their life, they are going to say, well, in theory, Tony, I would want all of that to be completely protected, right? But I think it's also reasonable that people recognize that if we want 100% protection with that 700,000, we're probably not going to make as much money on our money over the long term, right? Where we get protection, we give up gains, potential gains long term. And so there's this balance of saying, how much do I want to protect, knowing that I'm going to make a little less money, versus how much do I want to grow long term, but know that it's got risk. And so let's just assume that through that process, we determine that we want to split it for kicks. Let's say it's 350,000 that we say we want to make sure that on this 350, we can't lose. Well, we just started to develop what is in the foundation of our fiscal house. Now, by moving this 350,000 and dedicating it to the foundation, we now have how much left? 350,000, right? So if we take the 700 minus the 350, we've got 350 left. Well, this is now most likely, this is now what is in our roof, which is the growth component of our fiscal house. Now, what you've noticed is we have been very intentional with how we're investing our money. We have dedicated some money strictly to support our lifestyle. It's going to help us with the income. It's going to alleviate the pressures of knowing that we don't have a job anymore. We still need to live a life. Then we've taken additional money and we've said, come heck or high water, I just want to know that I've got safety with X amount of money. Now, in this case, it was $350,000. But hopefully what that does is it makes you look at your situation and say, okay, you know what? My income is taken care of. I can live the life I want to live. I've got enough money in safety that I can sleep good at night, knowing that I've got enough for emergencies. I don't have to wonder what the stock market does all the time. I don't have to watch it daily, right? We've kind of set aside that safety. But hopefully the goal is, well, because I've got those two components really dialed in, hopefully we can kind of create this emotional wall between you and your growth component, or the amount we put in the roof. Because it is this 350,000 that goes into the roof. The reason that that growth component is so important, and it's going to be different for every person that comes through this situation that we build an allocation model out for. But the reason that roof is so important is because 10 years from now, we hope that it's done better than everything else from a rate of return standpoint. And what it allows is, if we can get the most growth up here, well, now 10 years from now, when we need more money, right, because of inflation, we need more money to live the life we want to live. Well, now we can start redepositing, right? We can skim some off of our growth component, we can beef up our income, and then we can beef up our foundation, okay? So from a high level, this is how this is the framework that we use when we build out a wealth allocation model. So we have to decide, how much are we dedicating to the foundation? How much is being dedicated to the walls or income, and how much is being dedicated to the roof or growth? Now, here's the next step. So once that has been determined, we're gonna move to this next decision, which is going to be, what investments do we have? So I want you to think about this. You may have, let's just assume that we have, for simplicity, let's assume we have 4 different types of accounts in this scenario. So account 1 is an IRA on person A. Account 2 is an IRA on person B. And then account number 3 is a after-tax trust account. And account number 4 is a Roth IRA on person A. So this is where some complexity starts to come in. If we've decided how much money we're going to dedicate to each one of these components of our fiscal house, we now have to go in and say, okay, here are the available investments that we currently have that makes up the $1 million. Where does each one of these fit and why? Because I want you to think about this for a sec. If you're dealing with an IRA, depending on your age, the government's gonna force you to take income at either 73 or 75. Well, all of a sudden, maybe that needs to be a part of the income plan because we're gonna be forced to take money anyway, right? Well, then we start looking at other things and we say, well, we have this trust account, for example, fully liquid. We could do whatever we want with this. We're not inside of some type of retirement account. Well, maybe a big portion of our trust really sits in the foundation because ultimately we want full liquidity and the ability to touch that money when we need it. And at the same time, maybe the Roth, we want the most efficient growth possible. Well, maybe the Roth actually sits in the roof because all the gains will end up being tax-free. So you really have to start identifying which type of account needs to go into which component of the fiscal house. And you need to recognize that it's possible that some of these might get split into different components of the fiscal house depending on your situation. So folks, I hope that as you look at this, you start to say, okay, so a true mapping out my investments in this stage of life, in this transitionary phase, there's a lot more at stake than what there was when we were working, right? It's not about just answering a few questions on a risk tolerance questionnaire and then just putting it in and letting it be. There is a tremendous amount of benefit that you could have by mapping it out with a framework like this. I hope this video has been helpful. If it has, please share with your friends or your family. And as a reminder, if you want help from my team building out your wealth allocation plan, there's a link in my description below where you can get in contact with my team, as well as sign up for our newsletter or anything else. Until next time, see you on the next video.